Hey everyone, it's Michael Zipursky, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm very excited to have Dr. Mindy Weinstein join us. Mindy, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you are an author, you're a professor, you're the founder and CEO
Mm.
of your company, which we'll talk more about, where you specialize in helping businesses in kind of the area of digital marketing, but your insights have been featured in the Washington Post, NBC, ABC, and many
Mhm.
more. And then your latest book, which we'll be diving into, is The Power of Scarcity, Leveraging Urgency and Demand to Influence Customer Decisions. So I'm excited, to really
Mhm.
explore that with you. I know we were just chatting here before
Yes.
about scarcity and kind of the timeliness of what's happening in the world and maybe some events that you know better than I do about. But why don't we kind of just start off by going back in time a little
Mhm.
bit? You know, before you started your consulting business, before you wrote this
Mhm.
book, what were you doing? Kind of take us back to like the early days of Mindy.
The early days. So, I mean, I've always been a marketer. So, way back in the day, decades ago when I graduated with my undergrad, it was in marketing. And so that's what I really spent, the bulk of my career on.
Mm,
And really for me, like in 2007, I ended up focusing specifically on digital marketing and have spent a lot of time there. But fast forward to now, I mean, I'm a full-time professor, but I still have a marketing business. I feel like to be a good marketing professor, like I need to be doing marketing because it
I
changes
like
all the
it. Yep,
time. So,
for sure. Yeah.
yep. But during that whole journey too, this is when I ended up getting my PhD and it just set me on the road to studying scarcity, which then prompted the whole book. But always a marketer, always
Yeah.
been a marketer.
So for you, I mean, that's a really interesting kind of comment you made about being a professor, but also
Mhm.
still having, at least a foot
Mhm.
in the practical world and like applying. I think you see a lot of people in the education space who haven't necessarily done or are not doing what they're working on. So it's very interesting that you're doing that. Has that always been kind of a belief that you've had, or something that more like how have you kind of thought about that, and maybe has your thinking about that changed over the years?
So in terms of the, wanting to still have my foot in marketing,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah, well, I think for me, it was really when I got my MBA. So I was working full time. I was doing an MBA program and I remember like I really did like my marketing instructor, but I realized that she had never once worked outside of the school. Like had only been an instructor. And while she was good, I just felt like, well, gosh, it's nice to know more beyond just theoretical. And here's principles to like, here's what works and what doesn't work. And here's what works right now. And so I remember then thinking like, if I end up teaching one day, which that's been on my goal list that, I want to make sure that I'm still in the field because it is one of those industries that changes all the time. And I can't say that for every, type of field that people are teaching, even within business, but marketing especially. It's like things are evolving. There's always new technology, new ways to reach customers. And so I knew that was going to be a big thing that I needed to always, kind of do the dual roles there.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to get into, I really want to make this very practical
Hmm.
for people, because your book covers a topic that I think people understand at some level, but probably don't apply it in their business, or maybe it feels a little bit like internet marketing, or like this idea of kind
Hmm.
of scarcity. Like, how does it actually work? And is it applicable? And right, is it like honest? So we're going to get into that. But before we do, I want to just also kind of talk about how you got started in business. So once you decided, I think it was about 2016 when you started your
Hmm.
company, Market Mindshift. Um, what was going on then in your life? Why did you decide to actually kind of launch that business?
Right. No, I love that question because I have never looked at myself as an entrepreneur or as an aspiring business owner. I had been working at different digital marketing agencies for years. And one of the companies I was at, while I loved it, I was in a good role. I mean, we had major clients, like we were working with like Nickelodeon and Facebook and all these huge companies. It was fantastic, but I have 2 kids, and so I was traveling a lot. I was gone a quarter of the year, and
Wow.
on top of that, I was gonna have more travel put on my schedule where I was gonna be gone even more, and that was back in the day when my kids used to I have 2 boys. They're now teenagers, but, like, back then, they used to stand on the driveway and cry when I would leave for a week-long trip. They don't do that now. They probably wish that I would go, we fluctuate. Am I just
You're like,
being
yeah,
honest?
party time. Here we go.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I remember at that point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And
Mhm.
so I ended up taking that leap of going from being, an employee to being a consultant on my own. And fortunately, I had enough relationships that, I picked up a couple clients, but it was really scary for a little bit
Mm.
because you go from that paycheck to now you're responsible for all of that. But you know what? I mean, it's gone really well. And so since then, I've continued on. I do have a small team. So there's just, I have a few employees. So I keep it
Mhm.
small because again, I do teach, but that's really what got me into it. So
Yeah.
I even have my students ask me, like, oh, did you always want to be, an entrepreneur? Like, no, I just kind of ended up doing that,
Right.
going that
I mean,
route.
yeah, it's interesting because we've definitely seen this with consultants and people that
Mhm.
we've worked with or coached over the years who like I remember one person comes to mind right away who very similar, just felt like their schedule
Mhm.
was taking over their life and
Yeah.
had or has a pretty big family, like many kids, and
Mhm.
want to spend more time at home. I'm wondering if you could just give a little bit more kind of like insight into how you made that transition. Like, did you decide, well, I'm gonna wait until I build up a certain amount of
Mhm.
like cash reserves, or like just kind of take us behind the
Yeah.
scenes a little bit more. How did you actually decide to make
Yeah.
that shift?
Okay, I will absolutely I'll tell you it all because
Let's do it. Here we go.
and I'm a very risk adverse person. I don't
Mm,
like risk. I mean, that's just I should have been a risk analysis when I think back about it. Like that would have been the perfect role for me. But so really like I remember starting to kind of think, I want to transition on my own because I was traveling, I was gone a lot. And so I ended up just kind of testing the waters and I did pick up just, a side client
mm,
and even my company knew that wasn't an issue, but okay, this is working really well. And then from there, I was still nervous. It wasn't one client alone wasn't enough to leave. And I picked up a second client. And then just to give you short version, but still the details you need, I was on a family vacation and it was actually Thanksgiving, like years and years ago. And during that trip with my family, I got booked on a very long, extensive work travel trip. And I remember when I found out, I just was like, I just can't do this anymore. That was my tipping point. I can't
right.
do this. I will figure this out. And what was so amazing though is that when I did put in my notice, that particular company actually became a client. So then they turned me into a consultant. I wasn't having to travel. I didn't have as much of the, you know, really the responsibilities I had before, but I still did some things for them. But it's still, even with that, it was scary, and I remember like just, the always concern of like, well, what if I lose a client or what if I can't get more clients? But the tipping point was that trip where I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this to my
What got
kids.
you through? Like, so when you had
Mm.
those kind of concerns of just the mindset stuff going on, like pulling like, what if this doesn't work out, or right, all of this different kind of garbage that we have in our
Mhm.
minds swirling around at times, the things that might hold us back, limiting beliefs, things of that nature. Is there anything that you found at that time to be really helpful that was
Mhm.
just like that pulled you forward and kept you going to take that action that you really wanted to, but maybe at times hesitated or just weren't sure about?
Yeah, so there's two things. So I will tell you, and I actually remember this vividly. I'd stepped out on my own. I had just really small handful of clients. And then one of them, I lost one of them, and they were like the big one. And this was only like maybe 3 months into being on my own. And I remember just feeling like I couldn't even go on that day. Like it hit me that hard. And I remember just that, like, okay, I will give myself today to sulk and be stressed and be freaking out about this. But tomorrow when I wake up, I'm moving on. And so I gave myself that day. Like, I think I just kind of laid around. I was just like, I can't, just sulked and all that. And the next day I got up, I'm like, okay, I need to find more clients. And so that was a huge thing for me. But then another thing, and it's not necessarily a mindset thing, it was just pushing myself, just to keep meeting people. And so I would just keep taking meetings with like people I'd meet at networking groups and all over. And so some of the meetings didn't turn into anything, but some of them did. And I remember I finally had a meeting with someone. I just kept pushing myself because I'm one who doesn't really like that kind of thing. I have a hard time sometimes with small talk and people I don't know, but I kept pushing myself and I finally met someone who he had an agency and he's like, "Oh, I would love to outsource this particular function to you." And from that point on, like 25% of my revenue was coming from his agency alone for a couple years. And so I think it was the mindset was really just doing it anyway. I guess that's
Yeah.
the mindset. Do it anyway, even if it's
Yeah.
something you're not necessarily crazy about, like me, networking events and meeting people.
Talk to me a little bit more about that because I mean
Mhm.
that's such a kind of basic, and I don't mean basic in terms of
Mhm.
that it's necessarily easy to do, but it's just something that it's like a cornerstone of any business, right? Like building relationships, getting out
Mhm.
there, meeting people, having conversations is what we talk a lot about here. So that's something that for you, you said wasn't necessarily natural. You didn't enjoy like thinking
Mhm.
about, oh, I can't wait to just go out and talk to people that I don't know today.
Yes.
So what did you actually do? Like, how did you put
Mhm.
yourself in the position where you were able to go out and actually meet with people? Like, did you join, you kind of referenced
Mhm.
some networking groups. Did
Yeah.
you join networking groups? Did you just send emails to people? Did you like kind of walk us through those early days?
Mhm.
And even today, if there's a difference between what you're doing today
Yeah.
compared to back then, how are you creating conversations with ideal clients or people that you
Yeah.
want to, work
Uh,
with?
Absolutely. So back then, I did join a really big group out here. And so that really helped. Like I would go and I would attend and I'd have some conversations, and that would lead to like lunches and coffees and all those kind of things. And so that was a huge thing. And then the other thing that I would do too is just trying to spread the word. So then anyone that I knew, because fortunately, like with marketing and my services, like I could do it anywhere. And so just really tapped me my network of who I know of like, hey, do you know anybody that could use these services? And so that was really big. But then after, during that, well, not after, because actually during that time period at the same time, part of one of my roles when I was at the previous agency was speaking at conferences. And so it
Mm,
was doing presentations, sharing my knowledge. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to continue that. And so I started doing local events, but still industry conferences. And I do that a lot now. That's actually where I get a lot of clients. I get referrals, but a lot from conferences. And what I learned about that, because for me personally, I don't view myself as like the best salesperson, which probably a lot of us, I don't know, maybe I don't know who would
no,
admit that, but
I
I
think
just
a lot
don't.
of people probably resonate with that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But I realized that, okay, well, I like to teach and I like to share my knowledge. So if I get on the stage and I'm not selling, I give away information. Like people don't even need to hire me. I give them enough information. They could go on their own. But I realized then I set myself up as a subject matter expert. And then the conversations that happen, I end up getting, calls and emails, and the conversations are different. It's a matter of not me trying to necessarily sell them on my services, but they'll call to follow up. I heard you speak. I really liked what
Right.
you had to say. I'd be interested in working with you. And even during that call, it's still usually me educating them, probably to death, maybe a little too much. And
Yeah.
then I get
That's the
clients
teacher
from
in you.
there and it's a teacher in me. And
Yeah.
so that's really like now, I mean, that's a huge thing. And then of course, yeah, referrals, but it wasn't like referrals were the first thing that was happening. Wouldn't that be great? That was the
Yeah.
only thing.
So I want to get on to and talk more about your
Mhm,
book and this the idea of scarcity and kind of explore that in much
mhm,
more detail because I think it's just an incredibly powerful kind of concept. But before we do that, speaking about speaking, right, and putting yourself in the position to get in front of ideal clients where you can
mhm,
just be yourself, you can
mhm,
share valuable educational information, and by doing that, it clearly attracts people that want to learn more, and that leads to business. Is there like a tip or two that you
mhm,
would suggest to somebody who is like really connecting with that and thinking to themselves, yeah,
mhm.
I don't like to sell either, or I just maybe they do like to sell, but they just want to get in front of more people through speaking. Is there anything that you've done over the years, or anything that you would recommend that people do to land speaking engagements?
Yes, because I went down that road. um, It's the biggest advice is start with something that's small and
Mm,
local to you. And so there are a lot of different organizations, that are local. And so here in the US, we have a lot of chambers of commerce and we have better, like different groups like that. But there's groups like that everywhere. And so
mm,
finding some of the smaller organizations like that, they're always looking for speakers, someone they could bring into their meeting, even if it's just 20 minutes.
yeah.
So start with that because if you want to get into bigger conferences, like industry conferences for whatever field you're in, a lot of them want to see that you've had speaking experience. And
Mhm.
so if you can get something that's on a smaller circuit, smaller stage, but there's still potential clients, so it's still great. You need to get that experience. So then if you start pitching these conferences, then, you're really at the point where you can show that experience. I'll also tell you that, like, when it comes to pitching conferences, because a lot of them do have speaker submissions, the biggest thing is making it like almost in bullet point form of like, this is my topic. These are the three things that someone's going to take away. Or five things. If it's a
Yeah.
longer talk, you could do five things. If it's a 30-minute talk or 20 minutes, I've learned three.
Yeah.
So, and that's really big because then now it's not just a vague topic. That person who's in charge of hiring speakers can see, like, okay, this is really going to get me in. And then there's actually a third thing that just pops in my head because
Sure.
I've been doing this for a lot of just people in my industry is that if you know someone who's been speaking at conferences, actually like reach out to them for introductions. Cause I do that for one of the conference series that I've been speaking at for years. And I'm helping these new speakers bypass the normal system because I'm pretty much vouching for them. I'm
Yeah.
saying I trust this person. And so that's really how to go about it. And then even just the nervousness. I mean, because we all get nervous. Every speaker, they might tell you that they don't, but they all do a little bit, but that's okay because you know your stuff, you know your information. It's okay. Take a deep breath, get up there and just say what you know.
There you go. And I mean, also that feeling of nervousness, that's a sign of growth, right?
Yeah.
If you're not feeling that way, you're probably not growing or challenging yourself. So I think that's really great advice. All right, so let's get into
Mhm.
scarcity. May just first define how you would explain what scarcity actually means, and then we'll talk about how it applies to the world of consulting and professional services.
Yes. So scarcity, really the most basic way to define it is unavailability or some type of restriction. And I want to just immediately dispel the myth of scarcity marketing because I feel like a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, those are the emails that I get that are like one seat left or buy now, or miss out forever. And it's more than that. And it's actually a lot deeper and a lot more complex and powerful. So even within a consulting role, it doesn't have to be a product you're selling. I mean, in a consulting standpoint, you can actually still use the principles of scarcity.
Mhm. Totally. Well, let's get into that. So before we actually do, and this might be helpful, are there more than one type of
Mhm.
scarcity? Let's kind of go over at
Yeah.
a high level, how should people think about it, and then I'd love to get into some practical examples of scarcity.
Yes. So no, that's the thing. I think that everyone thinks of scarcity as like, oh, something just being restricted or sold out.
Right.
And that's only one. Okay. So there's really four types. And they're all ones that I've gotten into in my books. There's time related, and that's a limitation on time. So that's where like promotions and flash sales and things like that fall into, or limited time products. And
Mhm.
then there's demand related. So those are really, it is a supply issue caused by popularity, but also having bestsellers or wait lists, all of that fall into the demand related scarcity. Then there's supply related scarcity. And that does come from either like a distribution shortage or truly there is just a limited number available. And that's really big. And then limited edition is really just a twist on the original. And so it's still only in a certain supply. So it falls under supply related, but I like to pull it out as a separate one because it's used so often. But really, with these different types of scarcity, even as a consultant, you could use the different types. They
Right.
work differently
Yeah.
and they appeal to different audiences too.
So let's kind of go into a little bit more detail around those. I'm gonna
Mhm.
consider this almost a bit of like a lightning round. I'm just gonna give
Yeah.
you like a situation
Uh-huh.
or a bit of a theme, and then I'd love for you to share how scarcity might apply to that. If you don't feel it does, just let me know, and we'll move
Okay.
on to the
I
next.
love
But
it.
okay, so first one is scarcity in terms of marketing and getting more clients.
So, depending on getting more clients. And so, I actually, with that, I want to get into it as if you're in the actual prospect meeting, because
Yeah.
that's where I feel like you could really use it. And secret, which I guess it's not a secret because I'm saying it. I do this sometimes, but it's natural.
Hmm.
So, scarcity as a consultant, your time is limited. We only have 24 hours in the day. So you are naturally already have a limitation, a very truthful and honest limitation. So when you do get a prospect on the phone or in a virtual meeting or in person, it's completely okay to tell that client that you are selective on, people that you work with or companies because your time is limited. You only have so much time, so you can only focus so much on your clients. And so you're very selective and exclusive. And doing that, because it's true. I mean, we are all or we should be selective,
Yeah.
what happens, and I'll tell you this from just research and experience, is that when you make a statement like that, it's going to flip the conversation. So now you're going to have that potential client telling you why you should work with them and how they would be an ideal client. And so it's a really great way to start to close more deals.
Yeah.
And it's truthful. Again, only so much time in the day. We only have so much available.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. A really great kind of piece of advice. And also just the framing of that is so
Mhm.
important, because that's probably the biggest thing I think that holds people back when it comes to applying the concept of scarcity, is
Mhm.
their concern of like, well, am I being honest? Am I,
Mhm.
is this like, am I not being truthful? And but the reality is, like, even if right now you're not being selective, you probably should be, right? And so
Right.
that's a great reminder. Okay, so let's go to the next one. How
Okay.
about proposals? So kind of could be anywhere, kind of like
Mhm.
inside of the proposal process, could be the actual written proposal itself or the conversation around the proposal. But any examples of scarcity in that?
Yes. Okay. So there's actually one that I think is really great for proposals. And this is where you could show demand related scarcity. So you're showing popularity. So within a proposal, as you're laying out everything, let's say that I'm going to add to your scenario. So let's say
Please,
that you
yeah.
have different packages or different retainer options, like something like that, which I know a lot of consultants, we do have that. Here, you could do this, or that. Is marking on the proposal, this is the one, or this is the package or the retainer that is most popular among
Mhm.
my clients. And, this is what I would recommend to you. And then at the same time, which this is actually, it's social proof, but I do talk about it in my book in terms of like people like me, make sure with also within the proposal itself, having those testimonials, because then you're not having to tout how great you are. You can have someone else do it, and that's social proof. And it also shows popularity. So in proposals, I like to just notate something. Yeah, this is the one that's most commonly chosen or the best seller, or most popular. And that really can help you.
Yeah, I love it. What about, so one example that we've kind of seen multiple times with consultants that we work with is applying inside of the proposal that the pricing
Mhm.
available is only for a certain period of time. And then after that, it might change, or it kind of, something along those lines. What are your thoughts on that application?
It definitely depends on what your business is. And so if it okay, and I'm gonna give an example of one that I don't think worked as well, and this was a conversation with someone where it was a conversation, it was high pressure though. It was a consultant trying to hire an accountant, and the accountant was basically like, "Well, if you commit right here on the phone, I can give you this price, 20%," which you wouldn't normally expect that from an accountant, and so it
Mhm.
actually backfired a little bit. So I think there's that fine line, but I do think that if you are able to put it in a way and it would make sense, and say, here is, the pricing, the normal pricing, and I can offer this particular discount, over this time period. It can work. It definitely can work. But here's an extra thing you're going to want to do. And this actually ignites a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. And really, so that's more of the buzzword. It's loss aversion. So in the
Mhm.
psychology world, that's what we call it.
Right.
But if you actually put on that proposal, this is the discounted rate you're offering, show what it would normally be. Because then what happens, it's actually now framed as a potential loss. So
Right.
they can have this pricing, but if they don't end up, signing with a certain time period, they're going to miss that. And so it's really framing the message as a loss versus just a gain.
Yeah, I think a very common application of this in the consulting world is providing, let's say, options, but also in addition to that, having or offering a discount if the
Mhm.
client pays upfront, right, in
Yes.
full. And many organizations actually have a kind of a rule inside of procurement that if there's a discount that is offered, take, like, you have to
Mhm.
take it. So providing that is typically can be a win-win situation. So I think
Right.
that's all right. So we kind of talked about this, but I'm wondering, is there anything else related to fees and scarcity that you've seen that you feel is like a real best practice that somebody in the world of professional services and consulting should be aware of?
I mean, we covered most of them. I mean, I
Yeah,
would just say, like, with fees, if there is any kind of discount, like I said, a lot of people don't think about showing the regular price, but
yeah,
that's important because that's a trigger for someone. So
sure.
that's really big.
Okay. What other examples come up that you feel again would be relevant to the world of consulting and professional services? Could be from different industries, something that you do in your own
Mhm.
consulting business. I'm just wondering, you've really studied this area of
Mhm.
scarcity. what do you think people are not maybe making use of that they could be and should be?
Well, what I see, and I'm going to admit that this one's tough for me. So I'm going to as I'm telling you this, I just want you to know this one's tough for me. I think, in the world of consulting, it's a little scary to not work with everybody that comes your way, because there is that fear of, okay, well, what if I don't get more clients the next month? What if, you're always in that concern. And so what happens then is you are just completely available, and you're going to burn yourself out too. And you're going to end up working with people you might not necessarily have wanted to work with, or projects. And so one of the things with scarcity is actually the whole mentality of playing hard to get. And I'm
Mm,
not talking about just dating relationships, but I did in my book interview and someone else who he has his PhD in psychology, and he actually goes by the attraction doctor. That's what his branding name is. But we had this long conversation about this idea because it really is scarcity. And his thing is, as we were talking, he's like, I just think it's important for people to know it's not just playing hard to get, meaning like, well, not taking people's phone calls or not emailing them back right away or things like that. It's not what I'm
mhm,
talking about, but really on valuing yourself.
mm,
We all have value. We all are unique. We all have something to bring to the table. And knowing that and reminding yourself of that will actually automatically cause that playing hard to get without meaning to. But it's even goes back to the conversation I was saying. You could say you're selective because that just shows you're valuable. You
mhm,
value yourself, you understand yourself. And that could mean that you don't, yeah, take every project. Or the other thing too, and this is a little thing, if you're not sure, this is hard even for myself, of just saying, I really liked our conversation. Let me think about this to see if I would be a good fit for you. And again, that's hard for me sometimes too. But even doing that, all of a sudden now you played hard to get. And you probably
right.
did need to think about it. So it's not making it up. You need to think about it. And so those are little things, and they're so small, like in the wording, but they make a huge impact.
Well, you have a lot more kind of applications and ideas behind how to apply scarcity or um, more background on the power of scarcity in your book. But I want to ask you another thing
Mhm.
before we move on, and that is why scarcity. Like, so you've
Mhm.
been doing marketing, more specifically digital marketing, and you have that business. You have a few employees in addition to working as a professor. But why claim scarcity? Why,
Mhm.
why make that your thing and
Yeah.
not something else? So I'm just wondering, like, what
Right.
what was this? If you could kind of take us to
Yeah.
the strategic decision behind really like selecting
Mhm.
something that you want to be known for. How did you arrive at scarcity?
Okay. I love that question because it's it's interesting how this all happened. So as I've already mentioned, I teach, and part of that, I needed to continue my education, and so I went finished my PhD. And when I was working on my PhD, as most of you know, part of it is you have to create a dissertation, and you have to defend your dissertation, meaning you have to do your own research on something. And I knew going in, my degree is in general psychology with an emphasis in technology, and I was coming from a marketing perspective. So right away, I was like, I want to study something that has to do with motivations behind consumers. What motivates them? And so as I started diving in, I was in the program for 5.5 years, but as I was doing my research over those years, I realized, wow, in terms of motivational factors and what influences us, scarcity, from everything that I've read in academic research, is the most powerful. You can argue that. I mean, and the reason is because scarcity has been a part of us, as humans from the very beginning, where we were trying to, survive, and there's scarce resources available, scarce shelter, scarce food, scarce water, and our brains are hardwired to try to overcome any type of scarcity. So fast forward to today, okay, we might not be necessarily looking for, where are we going to get our next, cup of water or something like that, but our brains are still really, really wired to pay attention to scarcity. So, and I'm giving you a really long answer, so you can stop me at any point. So, when I was studying all this, I realized, like, through research, we've been able to see that in brain scans, when someone's faced with scarcity, and I'm talking about things like an auction simulation, like where you're going
Mhm.
to bid on a product that's running out. The brain activity where the decisions are made starts to light up very quickly, but it also shows in the brain through these scans that the normal steps that would have been taken to make a decision are just skipped. So it goes from scarce, urgent, this needs my attention. Then at the same time, there's been other studies that have shown also through brain scans that faced with something that's scarce, the valuation process, there's a part of the brain that does that. The activity starts to ramp up and just shows that if something is scarce, we tend to view it as more valuable. So it was through all of that research that all of a sudden I thought, okay, I always thought the same thing about scarcity marketing that a lot of people do of like, oh, it's just, yeah, act now. It's like, so what? Like I'm onto that, and all that stuff. But when I realized that, no, this is like a big thing and it's so subconscious, that's what led me down that route. And so I ended up doing my dissertation on scarcity and was done with everything. And then the pandemic hit. And I was just watching, I felt like in like real time, all the things that I'd been researching and studying like
Right.
play out. And so I thought, I think it's time to take this information out of just the academic world and bring it into the business world. So that's the long answer to what
Yeah.
really got me there.
No, I think it's a great decision because I mean, I've certainly been aware of scarcity. It's like
Mhm.
we've applied different aspects of it in
Mhm.
different businesses over the years as well. And one thing that actually we didn't touch on just kind of came to mind for me right now that I think would be helpful for some people that are listening to this and kind of joining us is when you think about scarcity, I think people very often, and correct me here or give me your perspective, Mindy, if you see it differently, but I think let's just take a consultant. A
Mhm.
consultant might think about, well, I'm applying scarcity if I apply this to my business, this is beneficial for me, and therefore, I have to be very careful about applying it. I have to make sure it's honest and all that, which is
Mhm.
certainly important. But at the same time, I think what people often fail to think about is that scarcity is not just beneficial to you as the consultant or
Mhm.
you as the provider. It's actually beneficial to the client, right?
Mhm.
There's a reason why they reached out. There's a reason why they're
Mhm.
having a conversation because they're looking for help. They're looking to solve a problem or to achieve a desired future state. Like they want change. They don't want to stay where they are, otherwise they wouldn't be having a conversation with you. So
Right.
if you can apply an aspect of like a reason for them or something that gets them to take that next step, not only is that beneficial of course to your business because you now have a client or
Mhm.
somebody that's kind of joined you, but they've also actually taken, like they've applied change in their life, right? They've taken a step closer to what they actually wanted, and so often it's they themselves that are holding them back from
Mhm.
taking action. So I think that's the other real benefit of scarcity, is that it is a benefit to both parties, not just to one side. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, so actually let me just pause for a minute
Mhm.
on that. Does that kind of align with what you're seeing in research and how you think about it, or is there anything that you'd want to add to that?
It does, absolutely does. 2 things come to mind when you're saying that is, I talked about the brain activity and decision making. Sometimes we get in those situations with your clients where they're just not sure and they're dragging their feet. They know they need it. And
Yeah.
so, the scarcity principles we know helps speed along the decision making. But the other is value. I mean, because, like I was saying, you are valuable. And so showing that to your client, you are going to be giving them that value. And so they benefit from it and you're able to really show that to them too. And so I
Definitely.
think, yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with you on just coming from those two different perspectives.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you, move forward with doing a book on this concept, because it's something that I think it's been written about, or there's been a little elements. I think in Robert Cialdini's book,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's maybe a section
Yeah.
or something on scarcity, but I haven't actually really seen somebody do a whole
Mm-hmm.
deep work around this yet. It's such a powerful aspect of business. So, want to encourage people to check out your book and learn more. In just a moment, we'll make sure that they can
Yeah.
do that, or you can direct them to the right place. But before we go there, I just wanted to ask you. I mean, you as someone in the world of education, you're looking at a lot of research. You have the benefit of working in kind of
Mm-hmm.
academics, but also running a business and working with clients. Over the last 6 months or so, what is one book that you have really enjoyed, and maybe that you've either read or listened to, but that you would recommend to others?
Okay, well, you just mentioned Dr. Cialdini because actually I just read his like most recent version of Influence, and
Yeah.
so, and actually he's a friend of mine, so he is someone that like I had been talking to through this process, and I even have his quote or his testament or endorsement. That's the word
Right.
I was looking for on the book, but I definitely for me, I feel like in business, no matter what industry you're in, even if you're business to business, you're trying to reach people. So we have to understand the human mind. We have to understand motivation. We have to understand influence. And so that's why like this topic of scarcity again interests me, but in a broader view, like Robert Cialdini's book Influence covers all the different influence factors. And his most recent version too, he brought in some more like recent additions to the factors. And so I think that's a great one. I even think
Okay.
it has good tips that help you with parenting. I can you
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we'll make sure to include that
Mm.
also in the show notes. And then, I mean, just before wrapping up, again, I want to thank you for coming on here today. I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and everything that you have going on. So, what is the best place? Maybe the one, website, URL, destination that we
Yeah.
should link up in the show notes and have people check out.
Yeah, absolutely. At powerofscarcity.com. So I made it very easy. If you go to powerofscarcity.com, that'll take you to the page that's all about the book. And you can see some other things about me, and my contact information is there too. So yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to help whoever needs help with this.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you again so much for coming on today.
Great. Thank you.